They are names etched not in stone, but in the wind. Their signatures were contrails over occupied Europe. Their monuments are the quiet fields where bombers safely landed, and their legacy is written in the stories that were almost lost to time. When we think of the P-51 Mustang, we see a sleek silhouette against a setting sun. We hear the distinctive rumble of its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. We imagine aces with painted swastikas on their fuselages. But for every famous name, there were 10 others who flew the same machine into the same hell, with the same courage, and returned to silence. Today, we trace those fading contrails. We listen for the echoes of engines that have long gone quiet, and we remember the greatest P-51 Mustang pilots you've never heard of. This is not just a story of aircraft. It is a story of souls inside them. The Mustang was more than metal and gunpowder. It was a vessel for humanity's most profound contradictions, terrible violence and breathtaking compassion, desperate fear and unbreakable resolve. And the men and women who flew it often embodied these contradictions in ways that statistics could never capture. Let us begin in the cold, thin air at 30,000 feet, where oxygen is thin and life hangs by a thread. Here flew Captain Richard the Watcher Holloway. His official record shows 17 missions, no confirmed kills. A footnote. But talk to the old bomber crews, the men of the flying fortresses, and a different story emerges. Holloway was assigned to a long-range reconnaissance unit, flying solo Mustang missions deep into enemy territory. Not to fight, but to watch. To be the eyes of the Allied command. His most legendary flight came during the planning for the Ardennes offensive. Intelligence had gone dark. The Allies were flying blind into what would become the Battle of the Bulge. Holloway volunteered for a mission considered suicidal, a solo, low-altitude photo run over the dense forests of the German border in broad daylight. No escort, no backup. For 6 hours, he flew his Mustang so low that farmers later reported seeing the pilot's goggles, skimming treetops, dodging church steeples, his camera clicking continuously. He mapped the entire hidden German Panzer Division movement. Flak tore holes in his wings. A German patrol plane spotted him and gave chase. But Holloway didn't run. He finished his grid. He got every photo. And then, with fuel leaking, he performed a maneuver his own engineers said was impossible. He pushed the Mustang into a near-vertical climb, using a cloud bank to disappear, and limped home on vapor. The photos he delivered didn't just save lives. They shortened the war by months. He received no public commendation. His report was stamped top secret and buried for 50 years. He was the watcher who saw the storm coming, and whose silence screamed a warning that saved thousands. Then there is the story written not in reconnaissance photos, but in gestures. First Lieutenant Aris, the clockmaker Callis, a quiet man from Connecticut who, before the war, repaired antique clocks. In the air, he earned a different reputation. He didn't have the flashy kills, but he had a preternatural sense of timing. During the infamous Black Thursday raid over Schweinfurt, when the sky was thick with German fighters and falling bombers, Callis's squadron was overwhelmed. His own wingman was shot down. Instead of engaging in a hopeless dogfight, Callis did something that seemed like madness. He calculated. He watched the pattern of the German attacks, the reloading cycles of the bomber gunners, the turning radius of the Focke-Wulfs. And then he began to fly not to shoot, but to disrupt. He would dart into the middle of a German formation just as they were lining up a kill, forcing them to break. He would position his Mustang in a spot that blocked a gunner's line of fire for a crucial 3 seconds. He flew with the precision of his clockmaking, his movements a metronome of interference. By mission's end, he had fired less than half his ammunition and claimed no kills. But post-mission analysis credited his disruptive flying with saving at least 8 bombers. A German pilot who survived the war later confessed in an interview that there was one American mosquito that day who wasn't trying to kill them, but to spoil every moment. He was not a pilot, the Germans said. He was a conductor of chaos, and we were his unwilling orchestra. But courage in the Mustang wasn't always about the heat of battle. Sometimes it was about the long, lonely cold of a forgotten duty. Enter the story of Flight Lieutenant George the Lighthouse Macready. Stationed in the frozen, wind-swept isolation of Iceland, far from the glory of the European theater. His duty? Patrol the North Atlantic Sea lanes, watching for German U-boats and providing escort for the occasional Arctic convoy. It was a duty of monotony and extreme danger, flying over endless, freezing gray water with no landmarks, where a downed pilot had minutes to live. One December night, a crippled cargo ship, the SS Polaris, sent a desperate SOS. It was carrying medical supplies to Murmansk for the Russian front, and was being shadowed by a U-boat. McCready took off in a blizzard, against orders, in a Mustang utterly unsuited for night naval search. For 4 hours, he flew patterns over the black, storm-tossed ocean, his landing lights sweeping the waves. He found the Polaris, and he found the U-boat, surfaced and preparing to finish the ship. With no torpedoes, no bombs, only his .50 caliber guns, McCready made the only attack run he could, a strafing run directly at the U-boat's conning tower. He raked the deck, forcing it to crash dive. He stayed until dawn, circling the wounded merchant ship, a solitary lighthouse in the sky, guiding Allied destroyers to the spot. The Polaris and its vital cargo were saved. McCready landed with ice on his wings and fuel readings below empty. He was reprimanded for disobeying orders, and then quietly awarded a medal that was never published in the papers. He was the lighthouse keeper of the North Atlantic, a beacon in the absolute dark, whose light was seen only by those about to drown. And we cannot speak of the unknown without speaking of those who fought a battle within themselves. Major David the Professor Chun, a Chinese-American pilot who faced prejudice on the ground but found pure equality in the sky. A brilliant tactician who wrote training manuals that are still studied. But his greatest contribution was born from grief. After his best friend was shot down and captured, Chun became obsessed with a single question: how do you keep a pilot alive when he's hit behind enemy lines? Using his own meager pay and working with French resistance contacts through clandestine letters, he single-handedly developed and distributed what came to be known as Chin's Silk Map, a tiny, detailed escape map of Western Europe, printed on silk, sewn into the lining of flight jackets. He included phrases in French, German, and Dutch. He added notes on safe houses. He created a whole evasion protocol. He wasn't ordered to do this. He did it because he cared. It is estimated that Chin's map helped over 200 downed Allied airmen evade capture and return to duty. He never fired a shot to save those lives. He used a pen, a silk screen, and a profound understanding of a pilot's greatest fear: being alone on enemy soil. His cockpit was a classroom, his weapon was knowledge, and his victory was measured in the quiet footsteps of men walking home through forests, with a piece of silk hidden close to their hearts. These are just the first whispers of their stories. The watcher, the clockmaker, the lighthouse keeper, the professor. They did not fill newspapers. Their killboards were empty or modest. But in the vast, terrifying tapestry of aerial warfare, they were the vital, unseen threads, the threads of protection, timing, guidance, and mind, that held the whole fabric together. They remind us that heroism is not a single, blazing moment of destruction. It is often a sustained, quiet burn of dedication in the face of oblivion. But the story doesn't end here. For the Mustang's legacy is also written on the ground, in prison camps, and in the very laboratories that birthed it. Consider the sky not as a battlefield, but as a courtroom. Here presided Captain Henry, the juror Vance. On a routine escort mission in early 1945, he witnessed something that would haunt him. A German jet, a Messerschmitt Me-262, the most advanced fighter in the world, attacking a formation of unarmed Allied transport planes. It was a slaughter. Vance gave chase in his Mustang, but the jet was faster. He could not catch it, but he did something else. He memorized everything. The jet's markings, its pilot's distinctive maneuver, the angle of attack. He wrote a meticulous, 30-page report after landing, providing the first reliable tactical analysis of the 262's weaknesses in combat. His report was circulated to every fighter group. But Vance didn't stop there. He became obsessed with finding that specific pilot. Through intelligence cross-referencing, he identified him as a Luftwaffe ace. Later, after the war, as part of the occupation forces, Vance, now a civilian interpreter, tracked the German pilot down. He didn't seek revenge. He sought an interview. For 3 days, they talked about that engagement, about flying, about fear. That conversation became the foundation for a joint U.S.-German report on jet combat tactics that helped shape the early Cold War air doctrine. Vance the juror did not pass sentence. He delivered understanding. He turned a moment of helplessness into a legacy of knowledge, proving that the greatest weapon against a superior enemy is sometimes not a bigger gun, but a sharper mind. Then there is the flame of memory, kept alive in the most desolate of places. In Stalag Luft 3, the camp of the Great Escape, there was a Mustang pilot named Lieutenant Peter, the archivist Finch. Shot down over Holland, he found himself in the camp with nothing but his mind. He began to do something extraordinary. He would interview every new captured Allied pilot who had flown the Mustang. He asked for technical specifications, for handling quirks, for stories of missions. Using a stolen nail and scraps of paper from Red Cross packages, he began to write, in tiny, precise script, an oral history of the P-51 in combat. He collected anecdotes, technical fixes, even jokes told in cockpits. By war's end, he had compiled what historians now call Finch's Folio, a handwritten, 100-page document that is arguably the most authentic, ground-level record of what it was really like to fly and fight in the Mustang. Not the official manuals, but the lived experience. He preserved not just the machine's history, but its soul. His prison cell was his cockpit, and his mission was to ensure that no pilot's experience, however brief or tragic, would be forgotten. But the Mustang's flame was also kept alive by hands that were never meant to hold a throttle. This is the story of Rosalind, the alchemist, Petty, an aeronautical engineer at North American Aviation. She never flew a mission, but every pilot who flew a P-51D after mid-1944 flew a part of her mind. Petty was part of the team working on the chronic problem of gun jamming during high-G maneuvers. While others looked at mechanics, she looked at chemistry. She hypothesized that the specific lubricant used in the ammunition belts was breaking down in the extreme cold of high altitude. Working in a small lab, she experimented with dozens of synthetic compounds, finally creating a new, stable lubricant that functioned at 60 degrees below zero. The Petty gel was rushed into production. Post-war analysis credited it with increasing the Mustang's effective firing time in combat by over 300%. She turned a chemical formula into a battlefield advantage. She was an alchemist who turned data into lifeblood for pilots she would never meet. Her battlefield was a laboratory bench. Her enemy was friction and cold. Her victory was the reliable roar of 6.50 caliber guns when a pilot needed them most. And finally, we come to the most poignant flame of all, the flame of return. The story of Captain Samuel, the ferryman Rhodes. His job was not combat, but delivery. He ferried new, factory-fresh P-51s across the Atlantic, from the U.S. to England, via the treacherous southern route through Greenland and Iceland. It was a lonely, perilous journey over open ocean. In late 1944, on his 7th ferry flight, he received a frantic, coded radio message. A B-17, lost and crippled, was drifting off course, its navigator dead, its crew desperately trying to find the Greenland airstrip. In the blinding Arctic whiteout, they were flying in circles, minutes from ditching in the frozen sea. Rhodes, in his brand-new, unarmed Mustang, found them. He had no charts for their position, but he had a compass and a desperate idea. He radioed the bomber. "Form on my wing. Do not let go." For the next 2 hours, Rhodes led the wobbling, dying fortress through the storm. He calculated headings by dead reckoning, fighting ice on his own wings, his fuel dipping into the reserve. He became their navigator, their guide, their shepherd. When the Greenland coast finally appeared, a mere dark smudge through the cloud, the B-17's engines were failing. Rhodes guided them to the runway, landing first, then circling to watch the bomber's wheels safely touch down. He then landed himself, his own fuel tanks reading empty. He had delivered more than a plane that day. He had delivered 9 souls back from the edge of the world. He was the ferryman, but his cargo was never just aircraft. It was hope, delivered one perilous crossing at a time. So what defines a great Mustang pilot? Is it the number of enemy planes turned into smoke and scrap? Or is it something more? The men and women you've met today, the watcher, the clockmaker, the lighthouse, the professor, the juror, the archivist, the alchemist, and the ferryman, they redefine greatness. Their greatness lay in protection, in precision, in guidance, in teaching, in understanding, in memory, in innovation, and in safe passage. They flew the same legendary aircraft as the aces. They faced the same fear, the same cold, the same lethal sky. But their legacy is not painted in swastikas on the side of a plane. It is etched in the lives they saved, the knowledge they preserved, the hope they carried, and the future they built with their quiet, steadfast courage. The P-51 Mustang was more than a fighter plane. In their hands, it became a scalpel for precision, a shield for the vulnerable, a pen for history, a key for knowledge, and a beacon for the lost. They were the unseen architects of victory. The quiet professionals whose mission was always about bringing something, whether it was information, a ship, a memory, or a brother, safely home. When the last Mustang engine fell silent, and the war became history, these pilots faded into the world they helped save. They became teachers, engineers, fathers, mothers, neighbors. They carried their skies within them, but seldom spoke of them. That is perhaps their final and greatest act of humility. Look up. The sky is empty of their contrails now. But listen with your heart, and you might still hear it. The distant, fading rumble of a Rolls-Royce Merlin, not as an engine of war, but as a song of sacrifice. A song sung by the greatest P-51 Mustang pilots you've never heard of. And now you have.